Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to the studio of the Sabbath School Department by the General Conference. We would like to study a very interesting lesson, this time the beast raising out of the sea. We're going to have several prophetical Sabbath School lessons. There's some difficult things to find out and to remember, certain symbols and things, but with the help of the Lord, this is why we're here, to help you and that you understand well the Sabbath School lesson, and most important, the Sabbath School teachers and workers, that they remember this important portion of our truth and faith, and that all our visitors and participants in the Sabbath School can be happy to enjoy these wonderful lessons. We would like to begin with a silent prayer. Amen. As usual, we would like to see the structure of the lesson. As you see, this is a Sabbath School lesson of the Sabbath, February 8, 2014, the beast raising out of the sea. And we have as introduction the characteristics of the beast. We're going to study a specific beast, and the next lesson we're going to study another one. And we're going to see what kind of beast is this, and also some parallels with the Old Testament, and especially with the prophecy of the prophet Daniel. And it's very good to make this parallel, because through the parallel with Daniel, we actually fulfill the desire of Jesus Christ, where he mentioned, the desolation, abomination of which Daniel is speaking. So it's very important, in order to understand Revelation, that we understand Daniel and that we connect the symbols and the meaning of it, so that we understand really properly the meaning of these prophetical lessons. Clarifying some symbols is the next portion, and we're going to clarify actually some symbols, especially for the new participants of the Sabbath School. That will be very interesting and important. The beast receives power and authority. We're going to questions 3 and furthermore of seeing what kind of beast is that, and what kind of character the beast have, who is the beast, and what kind of action is he, or why is he, better say, is called as a beast. Recovering from the dead wound, it's a particular prophecy which Revelation 13 is speaking about, and it is a very specific historical event which we need to talk about in order to understand how the prophecy is fulfilled. The next under title is a power that blasphemes, and then we have here a question 5 to see what is that blasphemy saying, or what is this blasphemy. And then the last under title, we have 3 questions in the last under title, persecutions against the faithful. Actually, it's very important that we understand this last portion, because otherwise to study just the prophecies in order to know them, to know their symbols and fulfillments and their parallels in the history, it's very good. But if you don't understand the meaning of that prophecy for our spiritual life, then the whole thing is in vain. And that's why it's very important, the last portion of this lesson, to understand that after we understand the prophecy, what that means for us, for my personal spiritual life. Obviously, this is very important, brothers and sisters. We need to understand that everything is given to us in this time of mercy, because we need to be prepared for these last days and for this last time. With the help of the Lord, we would like to go now and more details in the lesson, and we can go to question number 1. And question number 1 is simple. In one of his vision, what did the prophet John see raise from the sea? What characterize or what characteristics this beast have? Well, we notice already, and the question that the beast is coming from the sea. Here are the texts We have the text both in Revelation and also in the book of Daniel. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast raise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. It's very important that we read that slowly, and even if the participants know that, it's good that we read this Bible text so that we notice portion by portion all the elements of this text. So the prophet stood on the sand, and he see that from the sea can raise up a beast that have 7 heads, 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto the leopard, a body looks a leopard, and his feet were like a feet of bear, and his mount as the mount of lion. It's very interesting, this kind of picture. I have here an illustration which is what the prophet sees. It's very interesting that this topic about this kind of beast, on these animals which are inside of the beast and the symbolic, are already used in the Old Testament and the that the symbols are repeatedly. What did that means we can see here in the testimony on the 7-day Bible commentary. There is doubtless allusion here to symbolism of Daniel 7, of the beast seen by Daniel. The first was like a lion, second like a bear, third like a leopard. The beast seen by John have physical characteristics drawn from all 3. And actually the beast number 4 by Daniel is identical or very close to the description of the beast of Revelation 13. As you see, just as introduction to the lesson, we pass through a very interesting symbolic, and this illustration I have here in the back of me, it's not that exactly according to the description of the prophet, but is pretty much give the idea of that's what we are studying today. Well, going forwards to question number 4, we need to question number 2, excuse me, we need to clarify now some of the symbols. We notice plenty of symbols in the description of Revelation 13 and also in Daniel chapter 7. The good point of connecting to Daniel is that after the vision which Daniel see, he asked the angel about the meaning of these animals, and the angel explained to him what everything is, what the beasts are, what the horns are, and that's how we understand also the symbolic of the revelation using this explanation given to Daniel in the Old Testament. It's incredible how many years have passed by between Daniel and John, and what kind of identical images are given in the prophecy. Question number 2. What was represented by the sea from which the beast rose, and by the crown and his horns? Let's see a little bit. In Revelation chapter 13 verse 1 says, "And I stood upon the sun and saw the beast rise up of the sea, holding 7 heads and 10 horns, and on the 10 horns were crowns and the name of blasphemy." In order to understand what kind of blasphemy, we need to, or what is what means the sea. We need to go to Revelation chapter 17, and there is explained a little better in verse 15. "And he says unto me, The waters which you see, where the whole sitteth, are people and multitude and nations and tongues." As you see, in many occasions, so the best form we can explain biblical prophecy and symbolic is by looking in the Bible itself, and there we can see this kind of explanation. Here are the Bible verses: Revelation 13:1, which we read already, and Revelation 17:15. And here we have the prophet of Daniel in Revelation by Uriah Smith, and he explains very nicely the symbolic here. The sea is a symbol of people, multitude, and nation, and tongues, and he gives Revelation 17:15. The beast is the Bible symbol of the nation of power. It's sometimes represented by civil power alone, and sometimes ecclesiastical, and in connection with the civil power. Whenever a beast is seen to come out of the sea, it dawns that the power arise and thickly population territory. If the winds are represented of blowing up on the sea, as in Daniel 7:2 and 3, political commotion, civil strife, and revolutions are indicated. Well, we have also here an explanation of the crown. It's giving a Greek word diadema, which is actually not exactly the crowns we see in the illustration here, but diadema is it's a crown that is puts most likely on the princes and princesses, not really this complete full crown which is put in the head of the king, but it's more like the crown that is put in the queen. But no matter, here is also the translation, the literal translation, what's the diademata means, or what's the diadema means. These crowns and of the horns confirm the identification of the horns of political power. So it's not doubt, big crown or small crown, no matter, it indicates a political power. Well, we need to go to question number 3, and this is, who gave power, a sit, and great authority to the beast? What power is represented by this symbol? Well, I think the lesson is very short to go through the whole things to see why the beasts have 7 heads, and why he have 10 horns, and what the horns exactly means, and what the head means, and there will be not such a opportunity right now, but we can have a good test already on the beauty of the prophetical texts, and researching the symbols and find out how that applies today to our political life and what kind of lesson and meaning we can find. But we have enough to study on this lesson, and going to questions number 3, we will see who give power, a sit, and great authority to that beast. And by doing so, we're going to consider Revelation chapter 13, verse 2 and verse 5. And it says here, "And the dragon gave him his power, and his sit, and great authority." So we see that first John see a beast. And the beast is already a very complicated symbol, because it's kind of unity of different animals, and these animals have very particular indication of all this civilization of the ancient time, beginning with Babylon, Medo-Persia, and the Greek Empire, and coming into the Roman Empire, which is the last fourth beast. And now we have a dragon. Beside the beast we have a dragon, and the dragon is described a little before that. "And the dragon gave him his power, his sit, and great authority." And in Revelation 13:5 it says, "And there was a giving into him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given into him to continue 42 months." It is also a prophetical piece of time mentioned here. We know that what that means, day per year, and that is another prophetical period which can be calculated, but we're not going to calculate it now, because it will take too much time in our lesson, and it is not really the main purpose of the lesson. We need to read here the Great Controversy testimony. It explains very well the whole things, and answer very well the questions which we're talking about. In chapter 13, verse 1 to 10, is described another beast, like into the leopard, to which the dragon gave his power, his sit, and great authority. The symbol, as most Protestants have believed, represent the papacy, which succeeded to the power and sit in the authority once held by the ancient Roman Empire. And that's very interesting. The Catholic Church itself interprets this prophecy as the Roman political power, but the Protestants in very ancient time, I have seen, for example, Geneva Bible that have its quotation or commentary, Bible commentary, in the size of the text of the Bible, and there already you can see that this beast is related to the papacy, exactly as we understand it today. So it's the interpretation we have is actually not a revelation given to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but is the inherited revelation or the inherited interpretation of the ancient conservative Protestant churches. Continue reading here. Of the leopard-like beast is the declare that was given to him, a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he opened his mouth and blasphemed against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given into him to make a war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given into him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. His prophecy, this prophecy, which is nearly identical to the descriptions of the little horn of Daniel 7, unquestionably points to the papacy. So we have no doubt in that, and we see that the power the papacy receive is from the ancient Roman Empire, so the ancient Roman Empire transferred to the religious power its throne. Let me see here in the questions. Who gave the power to sit, the great authority to the beast? Power, sit, and authority. We see that the civil power is giving this authority now to the religious power. And we understand that this beast actually became beast because the religious power was combined and connected with the civil power. And that's what happened in the time of Constantine. That's what happened in the Middle Age, and we're going to see in the next lesson that that is going to happen also in the end of days. Daniel and Revelation, a little portion of text here. By what power was pagan Rome succeeded? We all know that it was by papal Rome. It's matter not in our present purpose when or by what means this change was effected. The great facts is appeared and acknowledged by all that the next great phase of the Roman Empire after its pagan form was its papal or religious form of power. Well, we can continue now recovering from the deadly wound. Now in Revelation chapter 13, to that specific beast, it's made a wound, and it is a particular things that happen that helps us to realize more clearly exactly what this beast is and this power. Revelation chapter 13, verse 3 and 5. And I saw one of his heads, and as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Wow, a deadly wound was given to him. Revelation 13 verse 5 says, and the power was given into him to continue forth in 2 months. It's an interesting portion of text also. In order to understand well this and not to be confused, once again we need to consider the Great Controversy, page 439. It's advisable if you read even more than that, if you read the whole chapter. Also remember the book of the Uriah Schmidt, who explains very well these events and give quotations and also the interpretation of this prophecy from different other sources. The 14 months are the same as the time of times and the dividing of time, 3 years and a half of the 1260 days of Daniel 7, the time during which the papal power was to oppress God's people. This period, as stated in present chapter, began with the supremacy of the papacy in 538 AD and terminated in 1798. At that time, the Pope was made captive by the French army. The papal power presented is deadly wounded by the prediction, and the prediction was fulfilled. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. It's interesting that exactly according to the prophecy of 1260 days, and also this particular prediction in Apocalypse chapter 13, we see such a wonderful parallel. It is very nice if we can spread now the chart and see the 2,300 evening and mornings, and we can see the 70 years, and we can see also the 1260 days and how that is related. But I don't think that is very important. This can guide us out of the lesson, and will practically take a lot of time of the portion and texts that we're going to see by the next questions. The questions number 4 here, the main purpose of the questions is not so much that we go in the dip of the calculation and found out if that is true or not, but that's really this papal power was wounded. In the revolution of Napoleon, the French army arrested the Pope, and that was something incredibly important, because the Pope was considered like the representatives of God and have such tremendous authority, even stronger than the political authority, which were the kings and the political powers in Europe in that time. So that deadly wound, later on we're going to see that healed completely. And that is what actually it's the amazing in that prophecy, that although this beast received a tremendous hit, a deadly wound, he is obtaining again his power. And that makes that the rest of the world say, who is like him, so strong, so powerful? We cannot do nothing to him. This beast is so strong. This beast is such a tremendous power. We have to obey him. We have to follow him. And that's how we are going to come to the next lesson, next Sabbath, which we're going to see another power coming, this time not from the ocean but from the earth. But let's see now this beast that received a deadly wound and have such a tremendous strength, power and influence. It says in the prophecy in Revelation 13, it says in verse 5 and 6, to what refers the blasphemy spoken of this beast, to this beast. Let's read the Bible verses, and says, and this was given into him a mouth speaking of great things, of blasphemies, and power was given into him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. It's very important here, if you have time, to consider what that blasphemy is, because the blasphemy is against God, against his name, and against his tabernacle. And if we begin with the tabernacle, we know what the tabernacle is. That is the temple later on, and that is where the law of God and the throne of mercy was presented. And we have a direct indication that that beast is going to transgress the law of God. It's going to try to destroy or make to nothing the law of God and his tabernacle. And we know that actually the restoration, the full restoration through the Seventh-day Adventist message is fear God that have created the heaven and earth, because the time of judgment have begun. You know, and then the judgment is based on the tabernacle, based on the law of God. In Daniel chapter 7 we have an interesting indication. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and it shall wear into the sense of the Most High, and things to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until time and times and dividing of times, and part of times. As you remember, great controversy says that the same period of time which is mentioned in Revelation 13, 5 and 6 is the same like Daniel is mentioning about the times and dividing of times. And the same things that Revelation says, that he's going to speak against God, his name and the tabernacle. And Daniel says more clearly that he's going to change times and and laws. And we know that the name of God as Creator is revealed in the law of the Sabbath. And to speak against God and to blaspheme against His name is because they change the law of the Sabbath into the Sunday. They undo the authority of God and remove His seal actually, and put their own mark, which we're going to speak a little later, the mark of the beast. Second testimony, Thessalonians, it's interesting, Apostle Paul, that actually was a very faithful Jew, and he was not even studying the book of Daniel, because it was not considered at that time as a canonic book, the book of Daniel. But he received by revelation the very same thing like Daniel and John receive. And let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except they come a failing away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Apostle Paul don't see the beast, don't see horns and crowns and lions and leopards and these things, but he see a man of sin, the son of perdition. And the indication to what this man is going to do are the same like Daniel sees and like John sees also in his vision. And it is who oppose the exalt himself all what is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. It's incredible. Once again we see God, His name, His tabernacle, His law, changing the law and changing the time, which God have established clearly. Here are some texts which can help us to understand what's the blasphemy and what all the things is about. The word blasphemy is added in his evidently points of the fact that the great words will be blasphemous initiations against God of heaven. For man to assume the prerogative of God and to take a title of deity, it is a blasphemy. Why it's a blasphemy? Because a pope is a sinful man like everybody else, and if you read a little more deeper some historical books about the different dynasties of popes like the Bourbons and several others, you're going to see all the terrible sins they have committed there in Vatican, thereby having their responsibility, having tremendous affairs with women's and children's and all kind of fornication and sinful life which they have carried out, and at the same time to pretend to be like God and on earth, or be representative of God on earth. It is a blasphemy. And here are more and more proofs of that. The sentences are taken by different commentaries and historical books, and they are quoted in the Seventh-day Adventist commentary. Be careful to consider all these texts as a testimony, as inspired words. It's more historical events or historical conclusions that are gathered here and that are indicating to the to what's really happened. And that's very powerful and very important, because if we interpret historical events alone by our books and by our own interpretation, religious interpretation, we can be accused that we manipulate the history. But if we quote historians that have nothing to do with our church, then we have a stronger evidence to prove our point. And that's why we use this kind of texts in prophetical explanations. Going forwards, and persecution against the faithful is actually where all these prophecies are headed, or which is the meaning and the final target of this prophecy, to alarm and to arise the attention to the saints, to the believers, to be ready, to be prepared for that very end of time. And let's see the question number 6. Who was able to change this evil power? Against whom did it wage a war? And how long did this persecution last? It's if we answer all these questions, and if we have time to explain all of them, it's probably not going to be enough to have just 1 hour in the Sabbath school lesson. But if there are a lot of questions, if there is arise the interest of studying the prophecy, let's not quench this interest. Let's open another additional hour in the Sabbath afternoon and explain in more detail these prophecies, because it's a lot of spiritual power and interest in it. And Daniel 7 verse 25 says, "And they shall be given into the hand into the time of times and the dividing of time." That's according to King James Version. Revelation 13:7 says, "And it was given into him to make a war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given into him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." It's very important that we don't turn into a speculation or certain interpretations which some other movements and groups are doing today, because they are very excited to put this calculation in our present time, even to address them to a future. But it's very safe that we stay in the interpretations of the inspired words, so that interpretations are confirmed by the words of Sister White, and that is the book of Uriah Schmidt. Revelation 13:5 is a Bible verse we have considered already 2 times in the lesson. "And they was given into him a man speaking and great things and blasphemies, and power was given into him to continue 42 months. And also in Revelation chapter 12:6 we have a parallel text to it. "And the women fell into the wilderness, and we shall have place prepared of God, that they should fit her there 1,200 and threescore days." You see the parallel between the different verses. And here we have a great controversy, and that is important that we stick on that text and the interpretation given here. "And now began the 1260 years of papal oppression, foretold in the prophetics of Daniel and Revelation." Daniel 7:25, Revelation 13:5 and 7. Christians were forced to choose either to yield their integrity and accept the papal ceremonies and worship, or to wear away their lives in dungeons of suffer death by the rock of Figot and headsman's axe. Now were fulfilled the words of Jesus, "Ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brother and kinsfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death." As you see, brothers and sisters, the prophecies are fulfilled literally, exactly. And that's why these beasts are presented in such terrible way. The animals that represent these political powers which give their strength and sit and authority to the religious power later on, combined with civil power, it's because the character of that animal is terrible. It is a bloodthirsty animal that persecute, that execute the faithful Christians. And we know that in the Middle Age, that was also called the Dark Age. Not only scientists, not only all kind of free-thinking people were persecuted, but most of all, the true followers of Jesus Christ and the true investigators of the Bible were persecuted. Continuing with question number 7, is it possible to number the believers who died during the Middle Age? Until what time were the martyrs who received these robes to rest? Well, the Bible verses say it's impossible to count them, but it's interesting that in Revelation chapter 6, when we read that text, it says that there is a number that have to be fulfilled. And Revelation 6:9-11, and when he hath opened the 5th seals, I saw under the altar the souls of them were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, boast ye not judge and avenge the blood of them that dwell on earth? And white robes were given into every one of them. And it was says unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. As you see that there is a certain number have to be fulfilled, or certain prophecies that have to be fulfilled before the vengeance of the Lord come, before the very end come, before the Lord comes to revenge and to give the price of every word, or the judgment, the final judgment of God takes place. When we go to question number 8, that is a question related very personally to us, and it is actually a very important part of the lesson, because considering all this prophecy that everything is going to be fulfilled, it is fulfilled, and it is a foundation on which we're going to build up the prophecy related to the modern time, and that is the next lesson. Actually, this is a question number 8, straight to our hearts. Are we prepared to suffer for Christ's cause, as did our brethren in the past? What is the secret of victory? I think that is the most important in this lesson. Don't forget that this is a Sabbath school lesson. It's not a Bible study for preparing a baptism or any other kind of a Bible study, but the Sabbath school lesson is supposed to be related with the purpose of missionary work. The Sabbath school is related to enlighten the mind of the visitors, and the members, they can study more deeply these topics when they're also at home. The question is, are we ready to suffer? And at what extent are we ready? And the 2 Timothy, Apostle Paul present one prophecy that is not just his prophecy, it is actually repeated in several other places in the Gospels. And chapter 3 verse 12 says, Yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. Luke comes to the same conclusion. But before all this, they shall lay down hands on you and persecute you, delivering you into the synagogues, into the prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And as you remember, Luke was not one of the disciples of Jesus, but what he did is that he make a research, in general research about the teachings of Jesus Christ, and he put the most essential points of his teaching in his gospel. And John says the same, and John was a disciple of Jesus, and he's the one that received a revelation in Patmos. And what did he say in verse 15, verse 4? Abide in me and I in you. As the branches cannot bear fruit of itself except it be a wine, no more can he except ye abide in me. And that is actually the answer of the second part of the question. What is the secret of victory? It's interesting that all these persecuted brothers, martyrs of our church, and martyrs of the Reform movement as well, were making 100 years of existence this year, 2014, and we're proud to have many martyrs which laid the foundation of the Reform movement exactly the same way as the saints that have been persecuted in the Middle Age and give their lives because of their understanding of the truth. And that's why here it's important to mention the testimony of the Open Look, page 285. In that case, that will be the second part. If he who was pure, holy, and undefiled, whom did good and only good in our world, was threatened as the base criminal, or he was treated as a base criminal and condemned to death without a vestige as evidence against him, what can his disciples expect but similar treatment? However, faithful may be their life and blameless their character. Dear brothers and sisters, I think it's very important to know the prophecies, and we know why we have to know the prophecies. We have to know the prophecies because we need to recognize the time. And we need to recognize the time not because of other things, but because we need to be prepared. It is a terrible beast out there, and he is growing, and his wounds is healed. His authority is growing tremendously all over the world. We can realize that every day in the news. And also the blasphemy continue existing, because we hear that also in the news all the time, with the child abuse and all the other things which happen in this church. But what we need to do is to take care of ourselves. We need to stick with Jesus Christ. We need to be one, like the branches of the vineyard are one with their stock, and we cannot separate. There is no other safety in this world. We cannot trust the legal system of this world the same way as the Roman legal system was not able to pronounce a faithful judgment upon Jesus Christ. We cannot expect that any other political power will be able to defend us. But we have a stronger power than that to defend us, and that is the power of our Lord Jesus Christ. Even the death cannot separate us from His love, from the salvation, because the final judgment is above the death. Our resurrection is expecting the saints. An incredible reward is prepared to all of them. Don't be discouraged, brothers and sisters. Let's be strong in the faith, and let's look forward not only to the next lesson, but also to look forward for the challenges that are coming in our life, so that we can demonstrate our faith, demonstrate a testimony in the front of the world, in the front of the universe, and with the help of the Lord, one day be one with Jesus Christ, not for a short time, but also forever. May the Lord bless you. Have a blessed Sabbath day and enjoy this Sabbath school lesson. May God bless you. Amen.